You'd think that when community safety is at stake, decisions would be based on the best science we have, right? But what happens when that science gets pushed aside? Today, we're going to look at a local land use case that shows how critical data can, well, just vanish.
So our story starts right here, in Birch Bay, Washington. You're looking at a community that sits downstream from a big, proposed 490-unit development. And as you can imagine, seeing flood projections like these, residents got pretty concerned about stormwater runoff. So they decided to challenge the project's environmental review.
Now, this whole dispute, it really boiled down to one single question. What science should be used to design the stormwater systems? A simple question, but the answer? Well, it had huge consequences for everyone living there.
Right from the get-go, the citizens appealing this faced some serious roadblocks. They needed to prepare their case, so they filed a public records request for emails. The city's initial response? They said it might take almost 2 years to get them. Imagine that. These kinds of delays make it nearly impossible for volunteers to dig through technical documents and build a solid case.
Okay, so this chart gets to the absolute heart of the scientific conflict. The developer's plan? It was based on old rainfall data, assuming a major 100-year storm would be about 5.2 inches of rain. But the latest climate science from the University of Washington projects that by the 2040s, that same type of storm could dump 9.26 inches of rain. We're talking about an almost 80% increase in water that the proposed system was simply not designed to handle.
So you have to ask, why was this newer, more accurate climate data just ignored? The official reason comes down to a legal concept called vesting. Here's how it works. Because the application was first submitted back in 2019, the project was locked into the rules that were on the books that year. So, in essence, a bureaucratic date, the submission date, was used to justify ignoring the scientific reality of what's happening with our climate.
The final decision from the hearing examiner, who's the official in charge of reviewing the appeal, was, well, it was alarming enough that it prompted an independent forensic audit. The whole point was to take a completely objective look at the decision and see if there were any patterns of bias at play. And what that audit found was this really clear 4-step pattern for how critical science was sidelined. Step 1. The new climate data was excluded for procedural reasons. Step 2. The ruling just made no findings on it at all. Step 3. It then declared there was no credible evidence for the community's concerns. And the final step, the whole environmental issue was just dismissed.
And this audit was incredibly thorough. I mean, they went through the 58-page ruling sentence by sentence. In the end, they pinpointed 43 separate, verifiable indicators of bias.
Those 43 instances of bias were then grouped into 7 different categories. And the most common one? Procedural manipulation. Basically, that means using the hearing's own rules to block evidence from even being considered. And that is precisely how the updated climate science got shut out of the record.
But look, this case isn't just about one bad ruling. It actually points to a much bigger systemic problem with the whole hearing examiner process, especially when it comes to this idea of deference.
You see, the law requires the examiner to give substantial weight to whatever the city staff recommends. The audit suggests, though, that this can easily become a kind of structural prejudice. In fact, the examiner himself called the city and developer's case a near-bulletproof permit record. It really makes you wonder, right? Was the outcome basically decided before the community even had a chance to present its evidence? And this deference is especially problematic when you look at how the system is set up. In Washington state, hearing examiners are actually paid by the very same cities whose decisions they're supposed to be reviewing. That creates a pretty clear financial incentive to go along with the city's position. It also creates what's called a dual agency problem, where the city is basically playing the role of both promoter of the project and judge. Because of this deference, some claims that were just factually incorrect were allowed to stand without being challenged. For example, the city claimed the official stormwater model couldn't be adjusted for climate change. But if you look at the model's own user manual, it specifically includes something called precipitation multiplication factors for that exact reason. So the tool to do the right thing was there, it just wasn't used.
So, okay, we understand the problem. The next logical step is to ask, what can we do about it? How can we make sure development projects are reviewed fairly and responsibly?
Well, the analysis lays out a few key reforms. First, you have to address the financial incentives that push examiners to just agree with the cities that hire them. Second, you've got to fix that dual agency conflict of interest. And maybe most importantly, citizens can demand that independent state agencies, like the Department of Ecology, step in and use their own authority as a safeguard when these local processes fall short.
At the end of the day, this one case, from this one community, really serves as a template. It's about asking a critical question no matter where you live. How does your local government make these kinds of decisions? When it's about your safety and your environment, is this system truly set up to find the facts? Or is it structured to favor an outcome that's already been decided?